Hello friends, you are on Ruslan Belov's channel. Today is October 25th, 2025. As of today, there are changes to the map for all sectors of the Ukrainian front. The main changes are occurring in the Huliapol direction and the Dnipropetrovsk direction. There are also changes in the Pokrovsk direction, the Kostyantynivka direction, the Siversk direction, and changes in the Kupiansk direction, which we will discuss and examine in this video material. And before we begin, as is tradition, I would sincerely like to ask you to subscribe to the channel. As you know, your subscription greatly helps the channel's development. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed. I would like to remind you that Russian units are currently actively advancing in the Vovchansk sector. There is already information that western Vovchansk has been completely cleared. There is also information that Russian units have managed to approach the Rubezhansk highway. Separate sources report the start of hostilities for Vovchansky Khutori and Pokalyane on the Ukrainian side of the Vovcha River. And apparently, the strikes on the dam in the territory of the Belgorod Reservoir pursue only one goal: to slow down the advance of Russian units in the Vovchansk sector of the front. Today, footage from the city of Kherson is again being published, and in these shots we can observe Russian artillerymen striking the eastern part of the city using multiple rocket launcher systems. In fact, these are crucial shots because for the past 3 or 4 days we have repeatedly raised the issue of Kherson. Information is coming in that Russian units either forced or planned to force, or took control of some micro-district, or did not. In general, in any case, this territory is completely covered in the fog of war. But one thing is clear: the Russian side, with all these actions, definitely pursues some goals. Either to truly force the Dnieper River and gain a foothold on the Ukrainian side, or these are simply attempts to force the Ukrainian command to keep additional resources, reserves, reinforcements and units in the Kherson direction, and prevent their transfer, say, to some Zaporizhzhia direction, or towards the city of Pokrovsk. Well, we will observe how the situation will develop further here. Next, we move with you to the Zaporizhzhia sector of the front, where Russian troops continue their offensive. This time, information is coming in today from the settlement of Pryviln. Such objective control footage has been published by Russian sources since the morning. And in these shots, we see 2 Russian soldiers carrying a Russian flag through the central part of the settlement of Yehorivka. And based on these shots, we accordingly make adjustments on the maps. This is how the map looked yesterday, October 24th, 2025. Only yesterday did the first information appear that the settlement of Pershotravnev or Zlahoda came under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. There is also objective control footage that confirms this information. As we see today, there is additional advancement of Russian units, but already to the northwest. We see that the Russian side is trying to cut off Vishnev from the settlement of Uspenivka, as well as from this part of the bridgehead. The Ukrainian side, of course, is trying to stabilize the situation, and equipment and personnel are constantly being transferred to this direction. However, as soon as equipment enters the operating zone of Russian FPV operators, this equipment is immediately destroyed. Apparently, hostilities here will only gain momentum in the near future. Next, we move towards the city of Pokrovsk, from where perhaps the most sensational news comes. As you can see, today the map has changed again. It is changing every day now, and every day the map changes in favor of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. We see that the Pokrovsk cauldron is gradually decreasing in size. Today the most important news comes from the territory of the settlement of Rodinske. Separate pro-Russian cartographic experts and services report that by the morning of October 25th, 2025, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to completely clear the settlement of Rodinske. So far, this information has not been confirmed by either the Ministry of Defense or various objective control footage, but in any case, this information, so to speak, is worth attention. I remind you that the active phase, or perhaps already the final phase of the offensive in this sector, began back on October 22nd, 2025. I remind you that we made the first adjustment here based on this video, where we see Russian soldiers, assault troops, who are gradually infiltrating towards Rodinske and accumulating in the area of high-rise buildings and garages. Based on these shots, we completely painted Krasny Lyman. There were several more shots confirming the Russian presence in the central part. On October 24th, Russian units improved their positions in the central part of the city. But already on the 25th, the city is completely painted over. I would also like to remind you that over the past few days, we have been receiving a lot of information from the northwestern part of the city of Pokrovsk. Such adjustments are provided today by various pro-Russian cartographic services. Today it is said that all these territories located in the northwestern part of the city of Pokrovsk are already under the full and confident control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And now, if we calculate the distance between the advanced positions in the north, and say in the area of Rodinske, and in the area of the settlement of Pokrovsk, the distance is already around 5 kilometers. This is practically no obstacle, not a barrier for Russian FPV drone operators. Moreover, Ukrainian units are unlikely to risk retreating across open terrain along Olympijska Street towards the settlement of Kherson. This is practically equivalent to suicide. Separate experts are already quoting figures, according to which, in the Pokrovsk agglomeration, possibly in the territory of Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, there are from 10,000 to 15,000 Ukrainian soldiers. This would be the largest encirclement since the hostilities for the settlement of Mariupol. Of course, for now, these are just conjectures, perhaps speculations. Perhaps there are literally a few hundred or 1,000 soldiers, no more, in the territory of Pokrovsk. But in any case, the situation here is already acquiring a catastrophic character, and Russian units do not stop for a single day. Today, video materials are also coming in from the territory of the settlement of Mirnograd. Apparently, the Russian army managed to establish full control over the Dmitrieva mine, located in the southern part of this city. In these shots, published by the Ukrainian side, we can observe artillery strikes on the positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation already in the territory of the mine. That is, indeed, there is no doubt that this sector has come under the full control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and based on these objective control shots, we are making accordingly an adjustment. Perhaps this is not just clearing the mine. Perhaps this is already an episode of Ukrainian units abandoning important positions in the southern part of Mirnograd, with the aim of moving to the northern part to get as close as possible to the evacuation lines. In the near future, apparently, southern Mirnograd, possibly even over the entire weekend, will be completely painted over in favor of the Russian Federation, and hostilities will already smoothly flow into the territory of Mirnograd and Pokrovsk. Today, no one has any doubts that by the end of 2025, Pokrovsk and the Pokrovsk agglomeration will come under the full control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. There are changes in the Kostyantynivka direction. Russian troops have advanced significantly in this direction. Video footage was obtained today from this point, where the forward positions of the Russian armed forces were located, and the entire territory marked in red has come under the full control of the Russians. Here, the advance was up to 1.5 kilometers in favor of the Russian army. Not long ago, Russian troops were in these buildings. There are buildings here, they were cleared, and the forward positions of the Russians were here. After which information was received that the Russian troops were forced to roll back a little, as the armed forces of Ukraine brought in reserves, brought in FPV drone crews, and pushed the Russians back. But today, confirming information is already coming in, and here Russian troops are already advancing significantly in this settlement. In fact, Russian troops are now moving towards the interchange, towards the supply road to this intersection, in the direction of this intersection. We will see how events unfold very soon, and for today, these are the changes here. Let's move on with you further on the map to the Siversk direction. In the Siversk direction, there are changes in two sectors of hostilities at once, in the area of Vyimka and in the area of Dronivka. Let's start, perhaps, with Vyimka. In the Vyimka area, Russian troops have expanded their zone of control to the west of this settlement. Video footage came from this point. Here, Russian troops advanced up to 1 kilometer deep into the front line, and the entire territory marked in red has come under the full control of the Russians, completely cleared and completely demined. Also, some sources claim that the Russian troops have actually straightened the front line between Kuzminivka and Vyimka itself, and this entire pocket is now also under the control of the Russians and is being cleared. As for Dronivka, There was already information earlier that Dronivka had come under the full control of the Russian armed forces, but there was no confirming material for a long time, and today confirming materials came in about the expansion of the zone of control in this settlement, as well as confirming information that this settlement has completely come under the control of the Russians, and the entire territory marked in red is under the control of the Russian armed forces as of today, and Russian troops are now moving just in the direction of the settlement of Siversk from the side of Dronivka. And perhaps we will see in the coming days the advance of Russian troops from the side of Dronivka in the direction of the settlement of Platonivka, in order to cut the supply road to Siversk, this supply road, and take it under physical control. After which, the armed forces of Ukraine will have only one supply road left that leads to Siversk from the side of the settlement of Reznikivka. Next, we move with you to the Lyman direction, from where very important footage is also coming. Today, pro-Ukrainian cartographic services published this video material, and in these frames we see a Russian saboteur who is already moving practically within the city limits of Lyman, and we see how a Ukrainian drone is trying to find the Russian saboteurs and attack them. This episode with the Russian soldier happened exactly at this point. Based on these frames, we came to the conclusion that Russian units have indeed come right up to the city of Lyman, and the information about the entry of the first units into the city's territory is apparently true. Next, we move with you to the Kharkiv region. Very important news is coming from here today, although it is not yet reflected on the map. A video has appeared where Russian soldiers are in the settlement of Kurilivka, and this information is confirmed by Ukrainian forces. Here is what they say about it. Next, I am presenting material from an informed, on that sector, resource of the armed forces of Ukraine. In full and without edits, the original spelling is preserved. Left bank of the Oskil. The situation is beginning to become critical. Today I received 2 calls from fighters from this pocket who described our position in this sector of the front. It is close to the concept of critical. The crossings are destroyed. Logistics are under fire from enemy drones. Those crossings that we managed to build, the Russians destroy with all barrels within hours of restoration, artillery, guided bombs, drones. As soon as our engineers restore the crossings, a strike immediately follows. I have no right to instruct the command, however, under such conditions, holding this bridgehead, to put it mildly, is doubtful. So most likely the situation with this large pocket of several settlements will be resolved soon, as the situation of the Ukrainian soldiers in the city itself is dire, and the city will most likely come under the control of the Russian army before the new year. Today, information is coming in that after clearing the settlement of Bologovka, the armed forces of the Russian Federation began to move further south and are currently attacking towards the settlement of Vovchansk. This information was confirmed today, mainly by cartographic services of a neutral and pro-Russian persuasion. Pro-Ukrainian cartographers have not yet confirmed this information. And in general we see the desire of Russian units to straighten the front line and unite 2 bridgeheads, one along the Oskil River, the other along the state border. And from these positions, the Russian army may in the near future begin a broader offensive deep into the Kharkiv region towards Veliki Burluk, Bilyi Kolodyaz, and, as a final point of course, the Pechenizke Reservoir. And that's all, dear friends. Thank you for watching, subscribe to the channel, give your likes, and all the best to you.